Díoghaibh go léir cóide agus tá fáilte ród. Welcome to Be My Guest with me, Mary Honan, on Lir Media TV, supporting the Samaritans, Limerick and Tipperary. And my very special guests today are, well, little has to be said about these two experts of Irish dance, Geraldine Ryan from Melbourne in Australia, and Dr. John Cullinane from Cork in Limerick, I was going to say, from everything revolves around Limerick. Dr. John Cullinane from Cork. Hello to the two of you.
Hello, Mary.
Thank you for, it's 10 o'clock in Australia in the evening.
It's 9 o'clock in the evening.
9, it's 10 o'clock here.
Yes, you're 11 hours behind Melbourne.
Yeah, we're at 10 a.m. It's hard to get used to that time zone. Geraldine, tell me a bit about yourself. I see the photograph in the background of a ship, and I can only presume that was the ship that brought you from Ireland to Australia. Am I right?
From Australia to England, where I transferred across to go to Ireland.
Oh, the other way around.
Yes, well, I came from Melbourne, that ship, the Maloya. It took 5 weeks to sail from Melbourne to England. And then, of course, I trundled across over to Ireland.
And what is your background, Geraldine?
Well, I was born in a suburb of Melbourne, Hawthorne, which is just outside Melbourne. My parents were both born, well, my mother was born in Australia. My father was born on a ship before it reached Australia. And my grandparents were all from Ireland. Cork and Clare.
Listen, I have a colleague here in the station who's from Cork, living in Clare, and thinks there's no other place but Cork in the world. And it's just like, there's no other county but Cork. But what was I going to say? How did you meet Dr. John Cullinane?
Well, when I travelled to Ireland in 1953, it was to investigate what was going on with Irish dancing in Ireland, because Ireland was just on the other side of the world to us in Australia. And it was always one of my ambitions to visit there to see the dancing. And of course, when I arrived there, I travelled around and met up with many teachers. And somewhere along the line, I caught up with John. And that was, I think, it wasn't the first year, though, that I was over there. It was one of the following years when I visited Ireland that I met up with John.
And is that your recollection, John?
I don't know when it was. It was in the 70s, I think. I'm not sure exactly. But when I caught up with John, I can't really remember the occasion.
John, can you remember?
Yes, it was Geraldine came first on that ship. That's the ship she sailed from Australia to Ireland to do her find out and take her teacher's exam. That was in the 1950s. And then it was later on, the time of the World Championships, the first years of the World Championships, sometime around the 1970s, that I met Geraldine in Dublin, actually.
And you've been great friends ever since.
Well, we've been dueling partners, put it that way.
Yeah.
That's a lovely photo of the two of you up here on the left. With you, it looks like you're cutting. It looks like you're cutting the cake.
Well, that was that was one of the times when John was out doing student exams at one of my classes, and he was just getting ready at the table there to start examining them, and I was sort of hovering around.
What's your first memory of Geraldine, John?
Well, I think I first met her in Dublin, as I say. She came over in the 70s because she was always one person who wanted to find out what was happening in Ireland and to keep contact with Ireland. And when she came in the 50s, like, as a result of that, she found out many things like the soft shoe dancing in the light shoes. They were doing their reels and heavy shoes and so on. And the costumes, she went back and modernized things in Australia. So she was always pioneering and progressing the dancing in Australia. And then she came to Dublin for the World Championships. And again, she wanted to get material, steps and sets and so on, and to find out what was the up-to-date dancing there. And I did some lessons with her in Dublin. We actually used Matty Milady's hall at the time. And I stayed on because, as you know, I'm from Cork.
Of course.
Dublin. And then she was, she took lessons from Aidan Punch and myself. And then she was looking for a teacher to come out. In those days, really, like, we didn't have workshops, you know, the whole concept of a teacher.
So you were both pioneering in that as well, both of you.
Yes.
That's right.
First workshops. It's your fault there's a workshop rule now.
Too many rules now. Too many rules.
Oh.
But tell me, Geraldine, how did you get interested in Irish dancing? John told me some of your story when he was talking about Australian dancing, and you starting with the heavy shoes in Australia, whereas we tended to have the light and the heavy.
How did I get involved in it, in dancing? Yes. Well, of course, with a bit of an Irish background, I think I more or less grew up in a little home where all we did was sing and dance and play music. And of course, that was what the home was. There was no television, no nothing, except everybody, well, I think all the people who came and visited my home were all Irish. Yeah. And they were all, and of course, they all brought their instruments along and they'd play their instruments, and the piano was always going and they were always singing and dancing, and they'd push the table back and make room and everybody get up and dance in the small area that there was. But that was the way that I sort of grew up. That was all I remembered as a young one growing up. So of course, then when there was a class advertised that there was going to be some Irish dancing, of course, that's when my mother decided to trot me off along to do some Irish dancing. And my sister as well, the next sister up from me. I was the baby of the family. and anyway, the next sister up and I both went along to this class, and that's where we started. It was held actually in a very historical old hall, St. Patrick's Hall in Melbourne, in Burke Street, Melbourne. Now, that should never ever have been demolished, because it was actually apart from being the main centre for the Irish activities, it was also the venue for the first Parliament of Victoria.
Oh.
So because there were no big halls in those days, and St. Patrick's Hall was the largest hall. They didn't have a building of their own, so they rented it out for a few years, and before Parliament House was built. And that was what. But then again, in the 1950s, somewhere in the middle of the 1950s, it was demolished, and everybody's been screaming about it ever since. But of course, that's all past history now. But I do have photos of it all, and lots of happy memories of going into that hall and having photos taken there and everything. I didn't send you a photo of the hall. I forgot about that.
No, but isn't it amazing? I was looking, John, at that should have been inside in your when we were doing about the costumes of Irish dancers.
Oh yes, well, that's right.
You can see the Scottish influence there as well. Do you remember the costume, John, the kilt that was in your book from the costumes of the time, and and the beret. The beret is very evocative of that.
That's right, with the turkey feather in it.
Yeah.
And of course, when the turkey feathers, some of my former dancers laugh about it now. A couple of my older ones, the ones in their 80s even, that are still around, they laughed. They said when you couldn't find a turkey feather, you'd go down to the market, and if there were turkeys there, one of the keepers would pull a turkey feather out for you and give it to you.
What were you going to say, John?
Mary,
and that was it. But the turkey feathers were just I don't know what the symbol of that was, but that was the thing of the day.
Yeah, the costumes in Australia were very much regulated before Ireland had a clue about regulating costumes. They came under the patronage of the Melbourne Pipers. They played a very big part as the patrons of the dancing in Melbourne. And so they actually had rules and regulations in 1915, that early, described the length of the costume, the height of the socks, the berry, and so on. So it is, in fact, reflecting the piper's costume, you know.
But you know, John, when you look back on it, I know I said it to you again in that interview with the costume, that berry, it really evokes the image that Deborah Mulvena is trying to, you know, that sideways berry type with feather. And, you know, you can see where she got the influence for that. And, you know, and every time I see it, I think of Deborah Mulvena and the berries that the dancers wear now, which is a contemporary version of them. But it's a lovely idea.
Later on, after I came back from Ireland with new ideas on costumes and everything, I did away with that costume and introduced several types of different costumes, mainly dresses with some embroidery, Celtic embroidery on them, and I got rid of the caps, and and of course when I struck an awful lot of opposition when I came back.
Yeah.
When I arrived back, the organisations here were mainly men, and they were very, very stubborn and very set in their ways. And of course, when I arrived, excuse me,
poor John, you're outnumbered.
When I arrived back with all these various new ideas, of course, I introduced them into my classes. And of course, the association, I was hauled up over the coals good and properly. And of course, what was I doing? Bringing all this newfangled rubbish back. What was I doing? I was destroying the tradition. And I was really carpeted over it. But however, I said, well, if I can't go to Ireland and find out what they're doing there, where do I go? So I said, well, I'm continuing. So of course, as my father always said, I was pig-headed and stubborn. And so I continued on my way. And that was what happened.
But you know, Geraldine, it takes a sense of, you know, I think you have to be a bit dogged and stubborn to progress in life, because if you sit back, nothing gets done. I mean, when you look at Michael Flatley, I mean, had Michael Flatley just sat back when he was gone from Riverdance and just sat back in his laurels, nothing would have progressed from his side of things. And when you look at June Deegan in London, June is a friend of mine, and she told me when I was interviewing her that she was at the side of the stage one day at a British Nationals, and somebody said, "Oh, that is awful. It's not rhythm, it's the syncopated rhythm she was doing." And she's saying, that's not rhythm, that's not Irish dancing rhythm. And June was sitting there working the side of the stage, and the teacher didn't know it was June's pupil. And June's pupil won the Great Britain after it. And she just felt like saying, there you go now with the non-Irish rhythm. And she won. But you know, you need pioneers, you need people to break the mold.
Yes, well, so however, with the result that I continued on, and it wasn't too many months or too much longer before some other dancing groups started to copy. And of course, they started to copy costumes and things like that. And of course, I brought back the soft shoes. We had never used soft shoes here in Australia. Reels and slip jigs were all done in hard shoe.
Really?
Everything was done in hard shoe. And of course, when I came back, when I arrived in Ireland, I had to stop and think, what country am I in? It was all so different. I am in Ireland, I kept telling myself, what are they doing? And of course, gradually I tuned in that the slip jigs and reels and things were danced in soft shoe.
Gosh, I can't imagine ever doing them in heavy shoes.
And John, of course, with the result that, and of course, in those days, the soft shoes that were worn were not the ones that they're wearing today. They were like a ballet pump with a little pom-pom on the front. With the little pom-pom on the front. And of course, that was the shoe that I brought back and transferred my group into, as I taught new soft shoe reels and slip jigs and started them in those. Well, of course, that was not appreciated here at all. It was, you know, I was really down and out. I was really blackballed, but of course, being stubborn, I just kept on my way. And with the result that in the end, shortly after I was back, I broke away from the organisation and I said, well, if you don't like it, I'm going on my own. And
you can like it or lump it.
And so I left them and I just continued on as my own organisation. And that was what I've remained ever since, just as my own organisation.
So are you not with on commission?
Oh, yeah.
I beg
you are, aren't you? Yes.
Yes. So with the result that
when she said
so I just became, in those days I was just registered as Geraldine O'Shea because I hadn't married Pat Ryan the piper. And of course, once I did that, the commission more or less hyphenated my names O'Shea-Ryan, and that's where my academy is now. It's the O'Shea-Ryan.
You were advanced even then, Geraldine. You were using the double barrel name before we ever had the teacher's book, and everyone was a double barrel name except me. I'm still Mary Honan.
Yes, well, you see, of course, so that was how it became the O'Shea-Ryan from my first registration as Geraldine O'Shea Academy to now just the O'Shea-Ryan Academy. And that was how it was combined then. And that's how it's remained ever since. But of course, when I must take you back, when I first arrived in Ireland, I was very interested in knowing what was going on. And then, of course, with the dancing, at that stage, I did not know that there were examinations. No one had told me until I gradually started to investigate, and I met up with this one and that one and different ones that I was introduced to. And gradually I met up with, some elderly ones. One was Cormac McGinley, I think his name was one of my examiners. Yeah. He was one of my examiners, and there was a lady and there was another man, I can't remember who they were at the time, and they were there, and there were a couple of musicians who used to come, and we had great sessions talking about Australia, because I was something like a bit of a strange person from another side of the world that they didn't know much about. And of course, they would talk on, and then they started to ask me about my dancing. So they had me doing all the dances that I knew, and then next thing they were calling others in, and I couldn't understand what this was all about. So, but what they were saying was that the style of dancing and what I was doing was the style of dancing that their grandparents were doing. Yeah. That their grandparents had done. And they said it was amazing, because apparently the early settlers who came out to Australia, the dancing had not altered. It hadn't changed here in Australia. But in the meantime, in Ireland, it had started to progress. It had altered and altered little by little over the years, whereas the version I was doing was what their grandparents would.
Yeah, but you would have
do.
had a lot of influence as well in Australia. You would have had a lot of external influences that would you know, carry into the dancing, like Scottish influences, and you can see it, I suppose, in the costumes as well. So that's how. Whereas here in Ireland, it was pure. It was the same all the time. John, what do you think? Do you want to add something there?
Sorry, it was the other way around, Mary. In Ireland, we were progressing and evolving the Irish dancing all the time on a slow thing. So by the time Geraldine came in the 1950s, it was totally different. The flared skirts and all of that, and the embroidery and the movement in the dancing. And the thing is, in Melbourne in particular, and Melbourne and Sydney were very different. Sydney had a lot of Scottish influence. In Melbourne,
that's what I was saying.
Pipers fought tooth and nail to keep any Scottish influence out of the dancing. And so they were in a time warp. The material that they were dancing was the material that Geraldine's teacher had learned before he came out from Ireland in the 1880s. So when she went back, she was performing set dances and styles from the 1880s, and the examiners in Dublin in the 1950s were looking at this and saying, what is it? We remembered now. My grandmother used to dance like that kind of thing. But I want to pay tribute to her as well. When Geraldine travelled to Ireland and took her teachers, she was the first one apart from Ireland and England. There was nobody else from Australia or America. All the Peter Smiths and Cyril McNiffs, all of those, they were a few years later. Geraldine was the first pioneer.
And Jan Curry Henderson was also a trailblazer, because I had Jan Curry on. But Geraldine, the resilience of you, I mean, in the 50s, I would imagine you had to come the whole way. Obviously, you came by boat, but that was God Almighty, it must have, like Jan Curry was telling me, it took over a week. It was 5 weeks, 5 weeks on the ship.
I was trying to think as I was saying it, how long did she say it took? I know she said it took weeks, yeah. Yes, well, we were 5 weeks on the ship, on that Maloya. It was its last run on the ship. I believe later on some of the ships hurried up and they were 3 weeks, taking 3 weeks. But our ships were, it was 5 weeks on ship, and I enjoyed every minute of it.
Oh, I'd have been ill the whole way. I can't stand ships. Ships or ferries or boats, I always get seasick. I think it would have been hell for 5 weeks.
It was wonderful. It was wonderful. I love watching people. And of course, you'd call into different ports and you would have a day in a port in a different country and sightsee around and then come back and join all the different people on board. It was wonderful. I loved it. I loved
and
it.
I see you there in the photographs with our president and first lady.
Oh yes, there you are.
And on the other side of me, you're with John McDonough.
That's right. Yes, that was out in Boston.
Yeah,
that was there.
Your culture honorary.
John.
She went to Boston, John McDonough. She got her Gradam Award in Boston. So that's the photograph of John McDonough and Geraldine. Geraldine got her Gradam Award there at the World Championships only a few years ago.
She sent me some amazing photographs. They are so colourful. There I was thinking that Geraldine was going to be sending me old photographs of Irish dancing through the ages and that. And then this explosion of colour arrived in my inbox. And I thought, wow, this woman is out there. Is that you, Geraldine, asleep on the with the coat over the ring, the hood up on you? Is that you with the hood on?
No, that's
you, John.
That's John. That's John.
What a photograph!
That's John, all rugged up on one of the early morning trains.
Oh, I'd be like that, John. That would be me now.
Geraldine gets you up. When I go out, we go traveling around thousands of miles, literally thousands of miles, and we're on trains and buses and everything. So when we leave, sometimes when we leave Melbourne getting up, she has me up at about 5 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, good God, Geraldine.
It is freezing. It's about 5 or 6 degrees. And we're heading up for Mildura. And when we get up there, it will be 22 or 23 degrees. So I borrowed this jacket from Paddy, her son. That's my usual thing. I borrow his jacket and his knitted gloves, and I fall asleep on the train and get a few hours sleep and a few hours shut eye. So Geraldine and myself have peace and happiness. We're separated and get sleep. But the difference in temperature from 5
wouldn't you think now, if you were going to Australia, that you were going to be going to glorious sunshine?
But Mary, that's not the earliest. On my usual run, every week, they've worked it out that usually on the weeks that I go to Mildura, hello, are you there?
Yeah, you're back again.
I travel about 3,000 kilometres a week. And some of the mornings, on a Saturday morning, I have to be up at 3 a.m.
Oh dear God!
To catch a 4 o'clock bus. That's it.
Do you want to say something there, John?
Yeah, I don't mind Geraldine. I have no pity. That's self-inflicted. She gets up at 3 o'clock in the morning to get a bus. But she drags me off to the bed as well because I'm on that bus as well.
It's self-inflicted, Geraldine. You've done that to yourself. You could be. I was only going to bed at 8 o'clock this morning.
But of course, all his complaints go nowhere with me. It's just, come on, hurry up, John. We'll be late. You'll miss the bus.
you can sleep in the car. You can sleep in the bus, and so on. Mary, Geraldine leaves her house in the suburbs of Melbourne, going up to Mildura. Now that means a drive from her home to the airport in Melbourne, about 40 minutes of a drive, or even an hour with traffic. So you're up at 5 o'clock. It's about 4 or 5 degrees, an hour's drive to get to the airport. And then you check in, and then the flight is about another hour's at Geraldine. Yeah. About an hour's plane flight to get up to Mildura. It's way north of Melbourne, and it's on the Murray-Darling River, on the river there. And it's beautiful wine-growing territory. But that's the distances.
And how often do you do that, Geraldine?
I go to Mildura every fortnight.
Wow.
But the rest of all the other places that I travel to, I go every week. But do you want to know my usual schedule when I'm not in lockdown at the moment? At the moment, we've been in lockdown, of course.
It must be hell for you, Geraldine, being in lockdown.
But, well, no, my normal routine is on a Monday, my daughter and I just drive from my home up to Kilmore, which is only, that's quite an easy run. That's only about an hour and a half drive up to Kilmore and for the class, and then we return that same evening. Now, on the Tuesday morning, I'm up early because I have to catch an early train to get to Ballarat, and then that's an hour and a half in the train. Then I catch another bus, which takes me for 2 hours down to Hamilton.
Oh, Lord
in the
Almighty.
That's in Hamilton, in the Western District, where I have a class. Then I run and catch another bus, which takes me for another 3/4 of an hour down to Warrnambool, or Port Fairy rather, where I have a class at Crosley. And then I have classes there from 7 till about 9:30 at night. And then I stay in the area at one of their homes. But then, and of course, by the time we sit around and have a meal and have some talk, it's usually midnight before I get to bed. And of course, then I have to be up so as to catch an early train, the first train out of Warrnambool at 5:30 in the morning to get back to Melbourne. And of course, then on the Wednesday, I run around and do the normal things that when I finally get back home after lunchtime. I usually do the normal things like cooking, washing, flicking a duster around and introducing myself to the family. And of course,
That's my favourite type of cleaning, Geraldine, just flicking.
Yeah, that's right. And then that's on a Wednesday. Well, then Thursday we travel to Warrnambool with my daughter, I do, and that's only up and down. That's an hour and a half travel up to Warrnambool, and I'm back that night, same night. But on a Friday I travel into the city to catch a train for a 4-hour ride, 4 hours in the train to Wodonga, and the classes from 4:30 through to 7:30 or 8 at night, then back to stay at one of the homes. And of course, it's midnight before I get to bed again. And of course, next morning, I have to be up at 3 o'clock in the morning to catch a 4 o'clock bus to take me down from Albury down to Echuca, which is 3 hours down the road in the bus. By the time I talk to the bus driver and then say good night, and I strap myself in and go to sleep in the bus. And then, of course, I have a class there at Echuca. Then I catch another bus for an hour and a half ride down to Bendigo, and I have a class there for another hour and a half. And then I catch another train to come back to Melbourne again on Saturday afternoon. Then every second Sunday, I fly up to Mildura, which is an hour flight up to Mildura, but it's almost an hour's travel from my home out to the airport first. And then I leave early in the morning, and I don't get back to my home around until about 9 o'clock or 9:30 at night. And then on Monday it starts again.
I'm just sitting here and I'm just in awe at, John, what do you think of that for energy?
Mary, what you were saying, you were in awe of John getting up at all those early hours.
I'm in awe of you being able to keep up with her, John.
Yes, Mary. I waited all my life for somebody to get credit. She's like a battery operated.
She's like the Duracell battery, the Duracell bunny that just keeps on going and going and going and going. I have never come across anybody with a work ethic. I mean, I actually saw you that they did a TV program on you in Australia, and you were dancing with your students, and I saw that. And I thought, oh my God almighty, that woman has so much energy. Little did I know the extent of your energy and the extent of suffering you put Dr. John through. You're a cruel woman, Geraldine.
Well,
I think, do you know, in Ireland, that get up at 3 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock to start to travel to their dancing classes. That is dedication.
I don't think anybody does that I know of. I don't think anybody would.
Now, just to give you an idea, when she talks about Mildura, if you look at, say, you're down here on the coast in Melbourne, the flight up to Mildura goes up north and over to the left. So you're on the borders with South Australia. One side of the river is South Australia, the other is Victoria. Now, when she talks about Albury Wodonga, that is over in the other direction. It's called Albury Wodonga. I'll let Geraldine explain to you, because it is on the border of Victoria with New South Wales. And there were even 2 different time zones. I'll let Geraldine explain. But that's the diversity. Over to South Australia, back to Melbourne, over to the New South Wales border, and up again at 3 o'clock in the morning. And
I don't think any money would pay you for that, John, but it's absolute passion. I mean, it has to be. You're absolutely driven by passion for what you do.
I don't know, it helps. Mary, it helps if you're mad.
Well, you have to be mad, and you know, they say you don't have to be mad to be an Irish dancer, but it helps. It's very, very helpful because it gets you through an awful lot.
Explain to them about Albury Wodonga, the 2 towns on the river.
Yes, well,
yeah, you can hear.
Yes, well, Albury is on the New South Wales side of the river, and Wodonga is on the Victorian side. Now, some people live on one side of the border and work on the other side. Some go to school on either side, you know, whichever side.
Yeah.
But it becomes very difficult if now, like going back a few years, we had daylight saving in one town, but not in the other. So of course, some of them, you would arrive in one town before you left the other one. And then and of course,
that's kind of like here in Ireland, you'd arrive before you left the other one.
Yes, and then of course, when you got to the other side, you were everything was closed because it wasn't open yet or something. So it was quite strange. But now they've got themselves into a regulated thing. Victoria and New South Wales are now on the same time frame. But at one stage they weren't. And when I would travel there, it was a nightmare. But even now, when I have classes, I have children from each side of the border, and the school terms don't always coincide. So for 1 week, you might have the ones only on the Victorian side while the others are starting their holidays. And then when Victorian side go on holidays, the New South Wales are still they're working, or they're just starting or something. So I've got them coming and going, and I have to stop and think, now, wait a minute, which side of the border are you on?
And have you many pupils?
It's a bit
confusing. Have a whole load to be getting up.
It throws us into chaos sometimes, the border there.
No, but have you many pupils?
Well, they come, once again, my pupils come and go because I don't do competitions now in the country areas. Okay. They're not interested in competition. Years ago, when I taught only around Melbourne mainly, I did competitions for years. And thank goodness I don't do competitions these days because I've got no time for them at the moment with all the nonsense that goes on.
I don't know how you ever had time for them with all the traveling.
However, don't start me on that passage again. But I'm quite happy the way I go at the moment. And the country ones, well, a lot of them, some of them couldn't afford it to start with.
No. And
of course, a lot of them, well, once again, to do competitions, you need more than one class a week to get anywhere.
Oh, absolutely.
And of course, I've run out of days in the week. The good Lord hasn't given me enough days to give them more than one class a week. And I said, if you want to do competitions, you will have to follow me around because I can't come here any more than once a week to give classes. So of course we don't.
Drop your camera slightly, Geraldine.
So we don't do classes, but they're flat out all the time. they have so many displays and functions to attend that they're busy all the time in their own communities. There are activities all the time. We have festivals in the local communities. They're called on all the time. So I'm busy all the time preparing them for some displays or outings or festivals or something of that nature. Apart from that, every year I take groups overseas. And I've done that for the last 30 odd years or so. And I've taken them around to different countries overseas. They have the option to travel with me and get the experience, and they love that because it gives them something to save for, and they get a great experience out of the travel, apart from the dancing and the performing. And we sightsee a lot, and you know, and a lot of the girls have come to many trips overseas. Some of them only come once or twice in their life, but others save up and save up.
That's what it's all about. It's much more than competition. John, were you going to say something there?
Geraldine, can you give them an idea? I just mentioned a few of the countries that she's gone to with her groups, and you can fill me in.
That's what I was going to ask her next, was what countries?
China, South Korea, Vietnam, Portugal, Canada, Malta. This is a few of the 30 to 40 different countries that she takes her groups to every year. And she Geraldine was planned to go this year, only at her 90 years of age. What else would you be doing? But the pandemic put paid to that. You fill in on the other countries, Ger.
Oh, the other countries, well, Russia, Czechoslovakia, where else? Oh, I can't think. There were 33 of them anyway.
Well, I can tell you that every one of the countries barring Czechoslovakia, I've never been to. I would love to see Canada. You know, and all of the countries actually that you mentioned. But I was in Czechoslovakia once, but only passing from Germany into Vienna. So we had to go through Czechoslovakia.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Some of your photographs with, it looks like indigenous Australians, or am I wrong? What, you know, are they Native people?
Oh, well now, the indigenous ones, that was up in Alaska. And now I was invited to take a group to join them on their celebrations. They invited all their indigenous people groups, all the different tribes. They have tribes over there.
Yeah.
And the different indigenous tribes, this particular year, they were inviting them home from around the world to take part in this festival. And they asked me to join them. I don't know why on earth I got asked, but however we went, and it was wonderful. We had a wonderful time up there in Alaska, and it was wonderful. But all the tribes, and of course, their performances were all mainly beating drums and stomping and chanting, and that was the different ones. They were all different there, and of course, we were the strange ones in the middle of it with the Irish group. And of course, they made a great fuss of us, and it was really wonderful. So we had a lovely time up there in that particular year. So that was in amongst all their indigenous tribes. Don't ask me why. I don't know why we got invited, but we went, and it was a wonderful experience. And of course, we've been to Alaska that was Alaska, and we've been to Iceland as well.
Wow.
And Iceland was wonderful too. That was lovely. It was very cold, but it was lovely. And we didn't get eaten. I think I sent you a thing about the bears there.
You did. It's I'll put it in at the very end of the
something about the bears or something or other.
Right.
But yes, the bears were out.
I still can't get over that photograph of John, because it's so like I would be in the morning. Like,
and of course,
like all wrapped up with
oh yes,
sorry for myself.
That's right. Yes, that was John. That was John, all wrapped up, looking like a bear.
I'm feeling so sorry for himself. Like, what did I come out here to Australia thinking sunny, and I'm up at this goddamn hour of 3 o'clock in the morning.
Can I say, first of all, I went out to Ger in 1974 for the first time, and I was training and teaching steps and so on. But I introduced the grade exams with Geraldine then in 1974. So she was the first teacher in Australia, way ahead of America or any place like that, to have grade exams. And over the years then, in more recent times, I have gone out to Geraldine every few years to do the grade exams. That's what we do all the traveling around with. But we only do like grades 1 to 4 or something, because it's mostly the little ones that she is teaching. But the distances and the temperatures, people think of me outside there. I'm looking for sympathy. Sunning myself.
You have all my sympathy, John. Every bit of it.
Australia. But when I get up in Melbourne, it's winter time, and it could be 5 or 6 degrees. The hour that Geraldine collects me at 4 or 5 or 3 o'clock in the morning, you're dealing with temperatures about. But then you fly to these other places and you're gone inland. So by the time you get there, it might be 22, 23 degrees. And I remember, do you remember, Geraldine, the last time or recently, we flew to Mildura and we got up there. My routine then is I don't drag coats and gloves and everything with me. I borrow Paddy's outfits, the same as me. And I borrow his outfits, and the hood allows me to go to sleep.
It's a great hood. It's a great hood. It's the type of hood I would always use going on holidays. You know, when you're stuck in a freezing cold, just wrap yourself up. And anytime I went on tour with Bunratty, if we were,
and of course, I think
I was on
one time that John was up in Mildura, he had the experience of one of their electrical storms with thunder and lightning, and he was absolutely shocked with the lightning. It was up there.
Mary, the temperature visually, we were supposed to have a party that night for my arrival, the usual, and the temperature, you could see it dropping before your eyes. And they told me, oh, there's a storm on the way. Well, the thunder and lightning and all the electricity gone, the people's sheds and garages flying up the road. You went to the window, the door, and you looked out at the fork lightning hitting into the ground in front of you. 6 or 8 places. Never in my life have I seen a storm like it.
Were you terrified, John?
Terrified in my life. Fortunately, the person I was staying with was a nurse, and at one stage she realized that the thunder noise was getting to me, and she actually had to put a cushion over my head and lie me down on the table and block out my eyes, because no matter where you went in the house, the lightning lit up everything. And then in front of the front door, you saw this whoosh, and you said, what was that? Oh, such a person's garage was gone. And then
that's just such a one's garage.
Yeah. And we went out then the next day, remember that, Geraldine, to look at the eucalyptus trees that had come down on people's cars, right through the cars and right through the roofs of houses and everything.
Yeah.
And then after the thunder and lightning, there was a change, and there was the most horrific hailstone storm.
Yeah.
Hailstones as big as oranges. Huge. And you daren't go out. I mean, if you got a belt of those, would knock you for 6s. And Mildura is a famous wine growing area. and all the wines and the grapes and all that were
Destroyed.
out with the floods. I've never seen anything like. And then the next day, like it's up. The temperature is up again about 28 degrees. You know?
And you've gone through that all your life. You wouldn't have it any other way, would you, Geraldine?
Yes, well, John was absolutely shocked with that storm that night. I think he went absolutely white.
That helped us. I can imagine. We wouldn't be used to. We're not used to those extreme weathers. We're either raining or cold, but we're never freezing cold, or we're never scorching. You know, we don't get extremes like that.
No.
We don't get situations where houses would fall off the roof.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we don't get lightning coming to the ground and burning up something only 2 blocks away from the front door, kind of, you know. And it was terrifying.
That and having to get up at 8 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning. God, I was up filling out an application form this morning to have it in, and I was up until 8 o'clock, and I got 1 hour sleep before this show, and I thought, I was thinking while you were talking, my God, there's no way. I have got up at 3 o'clock in the morning to get flights and things like that, but it's a rarity, Joan. Geraldine, I wouldn't do it every single week or every 2 weeks.
But once you get into a pattern, and if you want to do it, somebody said, why don't you catch later buses or trains? And I said, but if you want to be on that bus, well, you've got to be up for it. And that's it, you get up.
So you must go to bed very early.
Well, no, not really. I'm usually in bed about midnight.
Well, 3 hours sleep.
When I'm away staying at the homes, although I must say, with this lockdown, I've become very, very lazy because I haven't been getting up I haven't needed to get up at these 3 and 4 in the morning. When we've all been in lockdown in Melbourne.
What time would you get up at?
Oh, well, depending, anything from 7, 8, you know, sort of thing in the morning. But of course, the thing is that with the lockdown, well, when we weren't allowed out of the house, well, there was no reason to be getting up, and I did get very lazy. But of course, now that we're starting to open up again, well, I will have to shake myself and get moving again. So, of course, but now, of course, it's so late in the year that now we usually close down around about the beginning of December for our long summer holiday break with the schools.
Oh, God,
so,
yes.
Of course,
holiday summer.
So, yes, see, we have this is the end of school year, and a lot of my senior girls who are doing their final year's exams at the moment, actually, a lot of them are doing it. So they've had a very hard year doing it online and, you know, over the internet and everything. It's been quite hard on them. So I hope they all go well, but they're in the middle of exams at the moment. But when normally I close down early in December because Christmas coming up, parents and everybody have everything on. And of course, then the schools don't resume until February, and the universities don't resume until March. So of course, the ones at university, they have free time until March, and of course we have holiday. This is our hot summertime holiday time.
Very hard to get used to the idea, John.
I'm planning now that we're gradually getting a few more restrictions lifted. So I may get one class in each place before Christmas, and then the rest we'll just have to resume again in normal in February. So that is it. But of course, then of course it gets very busy because we have St. Patrick's Day close on our heels then. And of course, everybody wants everybody for St. Patrick's Day. And then it's a matter of who remembers what.
Sure. Do you not use the Zoom? Do you teach? Do you teach a
Yeah, well, this is it. Well, we started that, but then some of them couldn't tap in properly, and it wasn't working around the place.
Yeah.
And this was the thing. A lot of the families couldn't work it out, and it just wasn't working properly. So we've been keeping in touch with a lot of things all the time. So now we'll probably have a refresher, one refresher course before Christmas at each class, and then leave it until the start of the new year.
Your signal is very bad, very good, I should say, in Australia, because I had Brent Pace on.
Well, it's
Brent's interview. The signal was quite poor where he was. It was in and out, in and out. And I also had Rita Pierce on from Australia, and Rita's signal was great as well. But I'm looking there, Geraldine, at the amount of what seems like adult dancers.
A big part?
I'm looking at what appears to be a proliferation of adult dancers.
Yeah.
Well, yes, I have quite a lot of the mums and that join in, and there are some adults, but there's a lot of young ones. But anything from teenage upwards and into their 20s and 30s, there are quite a few of them.
Yeah, do you think that what were you going to say, John, there? Did you say?
Just to fill you in, these are not at competitions at fashion. They're at festivals. Yeah. And Geraldine takes her dances in the summertime. There are festivals all around different parts. Was it the Ned Kelly Festival that we were at the last time?
Up at Beechworth.
Sorry?
Beechworth?
Beechworth, yeah. We were at the Beechworth Festival, and that's all revolves around Ned Kelly and all his stories and everything. And there's a festival on, and I tell you, Mary, the amount of Irish culture that you go to one of those festivals and you go to the hall, and there's Irish artists that you hear of back in Ireland, but they live and their profession and their income and everything is out in Australia. And they only come back to Ireland and perform when they're home for Christmas.
You know, I'm going to ask you something there. Sorry, John.
And then Geraldine's dances, they perform at that, but they perform in the open air as well at these festivals.
John, do you think that, and Geraldine, both of you, do you think that dancers finish dancing too early? Now it's different now because you have the likes of Riverdance and Lord of the Dance, Speed of Flames, all those shows. And but for a long time, do you think that dancers tended to give up way too soon before you know? I mean, even in competition, could the ages have been older? Do you know, to allow for older dancers? Because you know, you find that some people just come into their own later in their late teens, early 20s. Their fitness level develops, and then they're finished with dancing. And you look at the likes of Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly, who went on much longer with their careers. Do you think that there's room for? Do you think it's a good idea now that there's all this adult competitions?
Well, that's one of the success stories of the World Championships, and I'm very delighted to say I've been part of that since it was created. That we raised the bar to the older age groups, and as we got the entries, then we split it again. Because originally there was only under 13 to 16 and over 16, and that was all. So even in the world, in the competition, but in Ireland, and that before all the shows came in, we really didn't have anything after competition. So you got to 16, 19 and you gave up. That was nothing to do. Now, Geraldine's group some of those are parents, some of them would be nearly grandparents, and they learned from Geraldine 40, 50 years ago, and they come to these festivals and book in for the weekend, and they have terrific enjoyment.
Yeah.
And then they go away to Europe during the summer. So they have an alternative, non-competitive aspect.
I think it's lovely. I think personally dancers and people give up so early, and then that's it. And what you've been doing up to the age of 18, 7 days a week in many cases, suddenly is gone from you. And you know, when you look at the adult photographs that Geraldine has sent in, and you think of the fun that they have beyond the competition, the social life that's there, that would be lost if you didn't have something like that. It's far beyond competition. All that, they look as if they're having a wonderful time. Yeah. Do you know, I mean, do you also think, John and Geraldine, that, you know, there's room for maybe putting the adult competitions at World Championships and that, and All Ireland's in the middle, somewhere in the middle, so that there's more people in the audience when they get to dance? Because by the time the adult competitions come on, you tend to see the crowds dwindling, the audience dwindling, and the children. When I was younger, and you'd go to the Arklen Afela Hall, John, and you'd watch the Munster Belt, and it would be your opportunity to see the older dancers and to aspire to being like them. Now you tend to kind of, everyone what goes in, watches their own competitions, goes home, and they don't have the benefit of watching the older dancers because they're finished long before the older dancers come on.
Yeah, but part of that is to accommodate the older dancers. Their competition of necessity has to be held in the weekends when they're not working or they're not in college or something like that, you know.
They might be able to have it earlier in the day on the weekends, rather, so that people could kind of benefit from watching like we did. Because I think when you see older dancers, I can remember, and I've said it to you before, the Bridges of Ross, watching Maura Carney and John O'Rourke and all of them, Anthony Costello, all of them doing the Bridges of Ross. And as a child, you're looking at it and you're thinking, wow, you know, this is just fabulous. And you always think the older dancers are better, even when they mightn't be, but you always have this image of the older dancers being fabulous, and that's what I want to be. Do you like teaching the older dancers, Geraldine?
Yes, I do. And of course, the whole thing is, with our groups, with no competitions at all, we do very well without competition work, and we have plenty of fun, and that's what it's all about. When it's all boiled down, the whole thing of the history of Irish dance, isn't it to enjoy it and have fun, hear the music and want to get up and dance?
And to spread the beauty.
That's what it is. And it in some instances, okay, competition is not for everybody. Some people like competition, and that's good, fair enough, that's their choice. But I don't know, in some instances, I think competition has gone to too much of an extreme, where it's almost win at any cost. And I think that's bad. And I don't like that at all. And
I think there's fors and against the competition.
Yes, well, this is right. I think that, you know, there's a good thing for them to be aiming to do things, but I think the student exams can do that without the competition. And of course, well, once again, I don't have the time for the competitions now around the country, and the country children are not interested in it. And the parents are not interested in it. And apart from that, they can't afford it, all the expense and everything that goes with competitions to start with. They can't afford to be travelling to the major cities down in Melbourne and wasting a whole day, maybe having to spend accommodation costs overnight or something for that, for maybe one child in their family. when they've got other children in their family who might be interested in sport or something.
Yeah.
So it's not
same here.
it's not workable. It's just not workable. But I have them from all ages, from the little tots up to the parents, and a lot of them now are grandparents. Yes, as John said, some of them are grandparents now that danced with me back in the early days. And some of them are grandparents who have just decided that they want to get up and do something and enjoy themselves. Well, they're welcome. And of course, we have a lot of fun, and they come traveling with us. And of course, they have a huge amount. It opens another door for them all.
Yes.
It does, and
Well,
it gives them great experience.
It's also a social thing, Geraldine, because it introduces maybe the shy child, the retiring child, the child that's socially distanced. It actually gets them to mix amongst
That's
people
right.
they feel they have of like-minded people. That
Well, this is right, and of course they
class really quiet.
They have a great deal of fun intermingling with each other, and of course, you know, that some of them are never going to be champion dancers,
No.
but I'm sure the majority of our grandparents in Ireland were not champion dancers, but they would get up and dance for the fun of it, and that was it. And this is the basis of it, I think. But whereas I think a lot of it today, some of that, they've lost the plot. They have lost the reason for it. They've lost the reason for the tradition of Irish dance.
What do you think, John?
That's what a lot of them do. A lot of them have. It's competition, win at any cost. And I've got to be better than the next. I've got to have so much glitter and glamour all over me that I look ridiculous.
There's nothing wrong with the bit of glitter and glamour.
And all of this. And this is the thing. So we don't have outlandish costumes. We have basic costumes, and we certainly don't wear any wigs or anything. They're natural hair. So long as it's neat and tidy and off the face, that's it. And of course, it's just and I said, the thing is, everything has changed. I realize progress. They keep telling me progress. I don't know where the heck we're progressing to. This is it.
Progress isn't always progress, Geraldine. Progress can sometimes be regressive. In the effort to be progressive, you can sometimes actually be more regressive than anything. Sometimes the things that you did in the past were actually, when you look back on them now, you're thinking they were actually nice.
Now, even with the dancing now these days, well, of course, it's come a long way from when I was dancing. When I was dancing, things were very, very different.
Yeah.
And of course, it was a very, very different style of dancing. It was very prim and proper, and very now. As somebody was shocked to realize that when we danced, if you kicked higher than the knee of the other leg, you were blackballed. That was not correct. You could not kick any higher than the knee of the other leg. And if a girl was doing that, she was more or less looked upon as a real little hussy. And that was it. And this is it. Now, of course, I said they'd all be turning in their graves if they see them now kicking over their heads.
I was talking
kicking over their heads.
I was
and
talking
this is the thing.
Stevens, and she was telling me.
This is the thing. But of course, apart from that, the shoes that we wore now these days, the shoes, I think they're horrible. Those big clunky shoes. I think they're horrible shoes, but that's what they wear. But when we danced, you had to wear just a plain leather sole shoe. No tips, no nothing on them. Nothing, just plain leather sole. And you had to get your beats out. That meant you had to use your feet. But you had to get your beats out just the same. And you had to work to get them out, not rely on big clunky soles to make the noise. And that was the thing. These days, those shoes, I call them, they're tools of trade. That's what they are.
Mary, Geraldine is talking about two things there. That her dancing class survives enormously without competition.
Yeah.
Now, take CLRG, and I'm as loyal to it in my 50 years and everything, but I'm critical at the same time. If you took competition out of the equation, if you took the All-Ireland and the World Championships, I don't know what would be left for CLRG to discuss, because everything else, the transfer rule, the association rule, all of those, they're all competition.
The costume rule.
And another point I'd like to make is Geraldine mentions a word there, and you would have to explain it now to a lot of Irish dancers. You use the word fun, F-U-N, fun. Wow, there's no fun. It's win or else transfer.
Yeah,
Win.
I think in some respects it is, but there are a lot of people out there, John, who really just, I mean, as I think I've noticed now with COVID, that youngsters, what they're missing most about competition is their friends. I mean, a lot of yes, there is a huge competition element where children want to win and parents and teachers want to win. But I don't think that's wrong either. I was one of those competitors who I loved competition, win, lose or draw, but I loved being around people. And I think there's lots of dancers like that who just love going to competitions, meeting their friends, going up on stage. But the minute they're on stage, they're highly competitive. But off stage, then they revert to a friend role with people. I do think there's a lot of hugely positive things about competition, but I do think COVID has actually shown us that there is other.
I was going to say that actually this virus, there's very little good to be said about it, but it has changed our attitudes. It has made us look at things other than competition, and it has made us realize that the children want things other than complete competition. And the other thing is that amuses me is it has contributed a bit to reverting back about the size of the stage. Recently, in years, I've heard teachers complaining, oh, the stage is only 30 feet long, and at the meeting we said it would be a minimum of 40 feet for the under 8s and 50, 60 feet for such a thing, so that they could spread out. And they're dancing on stages far too wide that they have to run and leap and so on. And now the virus has shown us that there is a
everything much smaller.
Come back and dance on your own patch. So that has gone back to the tradition.
And as well as that, John, I don't think these shows would have ever got off the ground or ever had any impact at all had COVID not happened, because people were so busy with their lives. They'd never have had the opportunity to sit down for an hour and have a chat about their life, and and we would have lost the potential for historical data about people's lives in dancing.
Can I say about Geraldine and myself, we are, as we describe ourselves, sparring partners. We get on like a house on fire, and we argue and discuss and everything. And when we get on a train or a bus, as you can see, John goes down to one end and goes to sleep, and Geraldine goes down to the other end. And that's the way we get on. But I have, thanks to Geraldine and our friendship and our contact, I have gone to Australia since 1974, but I have seen Australia. Going on buses and car journeys at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and getting on the road to get back before the kangaroos are out in the evening.
Oh, I'd love to see a kangaroo and a koala.
Well, that's the point I'm making, Mary. You go as a tourist even to Australia and you don't see these. You go to a theme park and you see them, or a zoo, but you can go to Dublin and see them in the zoo. But where I have been with Geraldine, literally, it is a case of, I had children doing exams one stage and they had to get back 200-mile journey, and they appreciate it because I took them in early for the grades, and the father came in and thanked me, and he said, this stage now, he said, we're driving back down to Adelaide to South Australia over 200 miles for the children to do their grades. But he said, we'll be on the road before the roos. And if you know the language, that meant before the kangaroos. That was falling. And so I have seen thousands of kangaroos, koala bears, frill-necked lizards, and
no, I don't think I could skip those, John. But thank you.
and you know my love of flora and fauna. I have seen parts of Australia that Australians haven't seen.
Yeah, I'd say it's a magnificent country.
I'm down in Crosley with Geraldine, and we've gone down into a volcanic crater. And you descend into this crater, and as you go down, there's a lake in the bottom of it, and you're going down through tropical tree fern vegetation. You get out of the car. No, you don't get out of the car, because this is alive with snakes around here, you know. So wouldn't be everybody's cup of tea, but it is my cup of tea. And I can say I have seen Australia in all its facets, even the cold and everything. The other
Geraldine,
thing,
what's your greatest memory in dancing? Can you hear me, Geraldine?
It's yet to come, because she is to be honoured by the Governor of Victoria State. She is to receive the Order of Australia medal, an order instituted by Queen Elizabeth to honour Australians for outstanding contributions. And at 90 years of age, sorry, I interrupted you, Mary, but I want to pay homage to her. At 90 years of age, she is the oldest living active teacher, still actively teaching. There are others older than her, but not actively teaching. I have in mind Lydia O'Moore.
You are truly, truly amazing, Geraldine.
Ask her about that distinction medal that she is to be conferred with by the Governor General of Victoria.
Were you absolutely delighted? Did you get an awful shock, Geraldine, when you were awarded the distinction medal?
Well, it was a surprise, but the thing is that, well, I was delighted that finally they are acknowledging the Irish culture here.
Yeah.
This is something that I feel is good, because Irish here, the Irish in Australia, have been the backbone of Australia.
Yes, indeed.
From the early days, and they brought their culture with them. Mm-hmm. And of course, I feel that I'm very lucky, because I have I'm forever grateful to my grandparents who came to Australia, brought their culture and their faith with them, and I've benefited by that. And now I was born here in Australia, but I've benefited by being an Australian too. So I have the best of both cultures, I feel. And for this honour, I think it was good that they have acknowledged the Irish culture. That's what I think it is.
It's just you're the second very famous person I've interviewed the last few weeks.
I don't know. Once again, honours are honours. They're all passing things, really, when you look at them in the overall thing, you know. But they're all very nice. But really, when you sum them up, they're just part of history, aren't they? You know. But
It's
now,
nice
John, I must bring you up to date. Just the other day, I was notified that I'm to receive the medal on the 25th of November. They're having a presentation.
Oh,
So is John on the Wednesday the 25th? I just got word the other day that they're having an investiture at Government House on the 25th of November.
I interviewed a lady a couple of weeks ago, Dorrit Oliver Wolf, it was her name, but she was Dorrit Oliver, and during World War II, she was a child in Hungary, and she used to dance for the King of Hungary, and her mother worked in the royal court teaching dance and teaching etiquette to the King of Hungary's children. But she received the British Empire Medal 2 weeks ago, and she was considered at one stage the second greatest jazz singer in Europe. And she said she was on again last night with Pat Barry for his jazz show. But you're the second famous person, recipient of such an award, a prestigious award that we've spoken to in the last 2 weeks. And I should be curtsying to you now, Geraldine.
Oh. No, none of that. None of that.
But Geraldine, John, thank you both so very, very much. This is over an hour and 20 minutes nearly.
Oh, goodness.
Just flew. I'd say, Geraldine, we could have talked for another, and certainly John, we could have talked for another hour and 20 minutes. Because
but of course, I'm noted for just waffling on.
we love wafflers.
And I'm knows of her just being the person that has to listen to her waffling on all the time and dragging me out of the bed at the early hours of the morning. I will never forgive you. But thanks, Mary. Thanks, Geraldine. All my love.
Slán leat.
Thanks, John. Thanks, John. Thank you, Mary. Thank you for everything.
Shindera leis on floor. That's the end of the show for today. Until the next show. Good day, Shiv Slán.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye, Bye-bye, John.
Bye-bye, Mary.
Bye-bye.